It's July 14th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the torrential monsoon rain here in South Korea. The Han River that cuts through the middle of the capital has risen dramatically because of the rain, forcing the closure of many roads and causing power outages for thousands of homes. Nationwide heavy rain is in the forecast until tomorrow. Over in Europe, South Korea and Poland are working on securing projects worth a total of $52 billion aimed at increasing cooperation in trade, infrastructure, and reconstruction of Ukraine. The European Union has agreed to lift restrictions on Japanese food imports imposed after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, with hopes that Japan will do the same for EU farm produce. Torrential downpours pounded South Korea overnight. The rain gradually eased off into the morning, but up to 40 millimeters of rain per hour are still being seen in some parts of the country. Arirang's Lee Si-hoo is on site with the latest. Si-hoo, how is it looking there?
Tammy, I'm standing on the highway crossing over the Damsu Bridge that's in central Seoul, and as you can see behind me, the bridge has been completely submerged by the rain that pounded South Korea overnight. And it's just drizzling right now, but in some regions of Seoul and the surrounding area regions, some 50 millimeters of rain per hour fell last night. This led to the closure of 4 major roads, including one on Damsu Bridge. Access to 27 streams in the city, as well as some parts of Hangang River Park, are also restricted as of this morning. There was also a power outage in a 2,000-home apartment complex in the Seodaemun-gu district in western Seoul. Many people living in basements have evacuated for safety reasons. Landslide warnings have been issued in some parts of Seoul, as well as in the cities of Cheongju, Ansan, and Kimjae. A woman in her 60s reported missing in Busan. Tuesday is still missing.
And Si-hoo, we are hearing that the monsoon season will last until mid next week. Then how is the government working to combat the rainy season?
You're right, Tommy. The rain is expected to continue. And the rain, it's not just the rain that we should watch out for, but it's also the lightning and wind that we should be cautious of. The Interior Ministry elevated its warning level to severe since last night. The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters also upped its response level from level 2 to 3. Authorities suggest that people stay out of at-risk areas such as basements and places likely to be affected by landslides. People should also stay away from streams and shores that are likely to flood. Doors and windows in buildings should remain closed. It's advised people stay away from construction sites as strong winds may push materials around. And last but not least, check for real-time weather updates online and on broadcast. Tammy?
All right, thank you, Si-hoo, for the report. Stay safe there. Now, over in Poland, a major outcome of President Yoon's summit with his Polish counterparts was the commitment made to reconstructing Ukraine's war-torn cities. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young reports from Warsaw.
South Korea has established a three-way system with Ukraine to support its post-war reconstruction efforts with Poland, with Seoul pushing for some $52 billion worth of projects through public and private initiatives. That's according to President Yoon's senior economic secretary, after the South Korean leader and his Polish counterpart held a summit on Thursday where they agreed to ramp up joint efforts for Ukraine's infrastructural development. Choi Sang-mok told reporters that Ukraine made a request to the South Korean government in May to provide some $20 billion worth of recovery support in over 5,000 projects. Seoul is currently working to provide governmental assistance through construction pilot projects to restore vital facilities such as schools, housing and hospitals. The government also estimates around $32 billion of potential private sector deals are in the works, particularly in building small modular nuclear power plants, with 6 MOUs among corporate entities, including Hyundai Engineering and Tusan Enerbility. Korean firms are also looking to develop airport and railway facilities, along with smart cities in Ukraine, to go beyond simply restoring infrastructure to upgrading them with advanced urban systems.
South Korea hopes to utilize its technology and own developmental experience that achieved the miracle of the Han River for Ukraine's reconstruction. From the second half of this year, we'll start formulating a smart city master plan for Kyiv and Uman.
In order to facilitate such recovery projects, Chair said that South Korea will offer institutional support, having effectively set up a cooperation system with Poland and Ukraine to develop and promote recovery projects through various intergovernmental agreements. Seoul will also open a Warsaw-based office to promote rapid information exchange and cooperation between public and private sectors and offer customized support for firms. It also looks to provide greater financial support through official development assistance and development loans, shortening the implementation process and seeking joint financing with international bodies such as the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. While Russia's invasion is still ongoing, the Yoon administration says that Seoul will continue to make meticulous preparations for Ukraine's post-war future, something that President Volodymyr Zelensky has called a common task for the entire democratic world. Arirang News, Warsaw.
3 MOUs have been signed between South Korea and Poland following their summit in Warsaw, including projects on rebuilding Ukraine. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korea and Poland are stepping up cooperation based on shared values, with both facing security threats on their borders. Condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a challenge to freedom, human rights, and the rule of law, President Yoon and his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda on Thursday penned an agreement to help Ukraine rebuild after the war.
특히 우리는 한국과 폴란드가 우크라이나 재건에 있어 최적의 파트너가 될 수 있다는 점에도 공감하였습니다. 오늘 양국 간 체결된 인프라 협력과 우크라이나 재건 협력 양해 각서는 양국 기업 간 협력을 확대해 나아갈 수 있는 좋은 기반이 될 것으로 확신합니다.
As there are already about 350 South Korean companies in Poland, the two will be able to cooperate in various fields such as logistics and infrastructure construction in Ukraine, and transportation and communication networks.
On North Korea, the two leaders agreed to double down on countering North Korea's threat to global peace and security, criticizing the North's missile program, including the most recent launch just a couple days ago, and calling for an end to its nuclear program.
또한 북한 정권이 북한 주민의 인권과 생존권을 도외시한 채 핵 미사일 개발을 지속적으로 하고 있는 점을 규탄하였습니다. 우리는 북한 불법 노동자 파견과 사이버 활동을 차단하면서 북한 인권 상황 개선을 위한 공동 노력을 배가해 나아가기로 했습니다.
They also took the opportunity to further foster their economic exchanges. Another MOU was signed to create a trade and investment framework to advance cooperation in various industries, business activities, and supply chains as South Korean firms expand into Poland's high-tech industries such as electric vehicle batteries and 5G. The two leaders also agreed to advance bilateral cooperation in strategic areas including nuclear power plants and the defense industry. President Duda openly requested that current South Korean arms being exported to Poland are manufactured in Poland as well. A third MOU was signed to advance infrastructure projects with a focus on the transport sector not only in Poland but across Central and Eastern Europe.
So now the future looks bright for cooperation between Poland and the Republic of Korea. Also last year, in 2022, Polish trade volume with South Korea exceeded $1 billion. So the 3 agreements signed a moment ago also serve as an important opportunity for cooperation between the two countries.
Following the summit, the Polish president hosted an official dinner at the presidential palace with around 80 guests. According to the top office, the two celebrated a successful year of bilateral trade despite the global economic hurdles and pledged to cooperate to safeguard the values of liberal democracy. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And during his last day in Poland on Friday, President Yoon is looking to branch out Seoul and Warsaw's trade ties through a series of business events. Now, that includes a business forum involving 89 corporate leaders from South Korea and some 160 from Poland, where they are expected to sign 30 MOUs on areas including nuclear power, energy, and infrastructure. The president will hold a separate conference with companies likely to be involved in rebuilding Ukraine to discuss challenges and possible government support. He will then have lunch with local Korean business leaders. Lastly, the president will speak at Warsaw University, followed by a Q&A session with students. South Korea and Poland have agreed that they're optimal partners for major projects, namely reconstruction over in Ukraine and in the defense industry. For more, we're joined by Professor Lee Hee-eun this morning. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
President Yoon and his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda agreed that the two countries are optimal partners for Ukraine's reconstruction. Now, Professor, how are they so optimal? I mean, what kind of cooperation and projects can we actually expect?
Right. This is a good example of supply and demand. And in this case, the supply is, of course, given by South Korea, and the demand is going to be from Poland. But of course, it's ultimately going to result in Ukraine's reconstruction. And so the reason why they're so optimal is because Poland is located in a really good location with respect to supplying the needs of Ukraine's reconstruction. Ukraine shares a large western border with Poland. And therefore, because Poland will be, I think, critical to the reconstruction of Ukraine, with South Korea having, advanced infrastructure technology with respect to road building, as well as IT technology. We have many major companies that can provide internet connectivity as well as cell phones. This is the kind of cooperation that I think is ideal when it comes to when the war eventually is over. Ukraine will need this sort of support from South Korea, and with Poland being a good logistical hub for supplying those needs.
So perfect geographic conditions. And now on top of that, the two leaders also vowed to work harder to ensure mutually beneficial cooperation in the defense industry. Now, Poland purchasing over $15 billion worth of Korean weaponry like K2 tanks. Do you think there'll be further purchases?
Oh, absolutely. I think in this case, Poland obviously is very concerned about what's happening in Ukraine. It really perceives Russia to be a great threat to its national security. And with the United States focused, of course, in Ukraine itself, but also with threats in China and other parts of the world, the United States has traditionally been a very large arms manufacturer. But Korea has been able to sort of fill the need for a lot of other countries that are unable to necessarily access certain kinds of high-level technology. And because South Korea has often offered very cost-effective means for producing things like tanks, aircraft, as well as even naval vessels, as well as just ammunition and armaments. South Korea, I think, is uniquely positioned in this case to then supply countries like Poland, who see maybe not an immediate threat necessarily of war happening in its own borders, but certainly in the future, it needs to build up its capacity with respect to its defense industry.
The same supply-demand situation that you mentioned also applies in the defense industry, I guess.
Absolutely.
Right. And topping Yoon-Duda talks was also condemnation on North Korea's latest ICBM launch and also doubling their efforts to improve the human rights situation in the regime. Now, why is it so important that Poland also plays a role in dealing with North Korea issues?
Well, historically, Poland has actually had a very close relationship in the past to North Korea. As you will recall, Poland was part of the Eastern Bloc countries at the end of during the Cold War that had very active ties with North Korea. Poland currently still has an embassy, and they have normal diplomatic relations between the two. Now, of course, those things have cooled off quite a bit since Poland has engaged South Korea, particularly after Poland's democratization efforts in the 80s and 90s. But that remains, there still remains a relatively closer relationship between Poland and North Korea. And so with respect to, and I will have to mention here as well, North Korean workers were found to be in Poland as well. So there is a historic relationship between the two. So Poland exercises some sort of, I wouldn't say leverage per se, but there is that maintaining of relations between the two sides, which remains stable. And so if Poland can exercise some of its goodwill with respect to North Korea, maybe there's some role for Poland to play with respect to North Korean policy and North Korea's general ideas with respect to human rights and other matters of importance.
And a South Korea-Poland business roundtable coming up in the coming hour. This time, an 89-member business group has tagged along on Yoon's trip to Europe. What does that say about economic cooperation and relations between the two countries? I mean, what tangible outcome can we actually expect from the meeting?
Well, President Yoon has wanted to be, Korea's #1 salesman. So in this case, it sort of fits in that sort of vein of his policies of increasing foreign trade. And I think, Poland is certainly one of those countries which desires Korean products. But also, I think it sees itself, with respect to South Korea, as not being a direct threat to any of Poland's national interests. South Korea is a relatively a country of great goodwill, has a lot of soft power. I think certainly Poland could access other countries and get their support. But I think Korea plays a unique role in the world because it's not seen to be a great threat to other countries. And so if Poland wants to engage in greater economic cooperation, there's no particular trade-off on the Polish side with respect to giving up any political sovereignty or any kinds of issues that it may have to compromise. So I think Poland sees South Korea as a very unique, I think, contributing partner to its economic development. And I think South Korea has, of course, a lot to offer given its own history with respect to reconstruction, but also Korea's position in the world as being a great supplier of great technological needs, including nuclear, energy, as well as other areas which I think South Korea can make a great contribution to.
Sure. An optimal win-win situation for both South Korea and Poland. All right, Professor Lee Hee-hyun, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a great day.
Thank you.
The European Union has agreed to remove import restrictions on food products coming in from Fukushima. Now, they say the decision was based on a scientific evidence and assessment from the IAEA. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The European Union on Thursday announced it would lift restrictions on food imports from Fukushima and any Japanese import restrictions imposed after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear accident.
On our side, the European Union side, we agreed to lift the remaining restrictive import measures that were linked to the Fukushima accident. We have taken this decision based on science and based on the proof of evidence and based on the assessment of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
While the European Commission says that the restriction had been fully lifted, it called on Japan to continue to monitor for radioactivity and publish its findings. Since an earthquake and tsunami wrecked the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in 2011, the EU had required pre-export testing of food products for radioactivity. And since 2021, it had required certificates showing levels of radioactive isotopes in a number of agricultural and fisheries goods from the area. With the latest lifting of restrictions, the EU hopes that Japan will also ease restrictions on EU farm produce, as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said both sides had also agreed to work on removing Japanese trade barriers to EU beef, fruit, and vegetables. In response, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida welcomed the latest EU announcement, saying the lifting of the restriction will help drive forward the reconstruction of the devastated areas, adding that Japan would also make a judgment on EU farm produce restrictions based on science, as the EU had done in lifting its restrictions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And South Korea and the U.S. conducted combined air drills over the Korean peninsula on Thursday, a day after North Korea fired an ICBM toward the East Sea. The Joint Chief of Staff said Thursday evening that Thurs F-15K fighters, Washington's F-16 jets, and the American B-52H strategic bomber were deployed in the training. The military explained that South Korea and the U.S. enhanced their ability to conduct combined operations by swiftly deploying Washington's extended deterrence asset. It also added that the drills demonstrated Washington's ironclad commitment to reinforcing extended deterrence in South Korea. And the UN Security Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss the North's recent ICBM launch, where North Korea spoke for the first time in over 5 years. A representative from the regime said the latest ICBM launch was conducted to ensure the security of North Korea, adding that the missile landed far from Japan and posed no threat. He slammed the Washington Declaration signed by the leaders of South Korea and the U.S., arguing the agreement to form the nuclear consultative group shows their willingness to use nuclear weapons against the North. Thursday's meeting came at the request of the U.S., France, Japan, Albania, Malta, and the UK, with South Korea attending as an interested party.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Sudan's West Darfur. The United Nations said on Thursday that a mass grave has been found, containing 87 bodies, including women and children. It was discovered outside the region's capital of El Geneina. Among the victims were ethnicities often targeted by Arab militias, supported by the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group. The UN has demanded an investigation and says it has evidence that the RSF committed the killings last month. The RSF has denied any involvement and has pinned the blame on tribal conflict. The paramilitary group's conflict with Sudan's military since April has brought the country to the brink of civil war. There are worries the killings could be the start of a repeat of an ethnic cleansing campaign in Darfur in 2003, when around 300,000 people were killed by the Janjaweed militia, a group that grew into the RSF. Moving on to the United States, on Thursday, the Food and Drug Administration approved the country's first non-prescription birth control pill. Called Opill, it's a daily oral pill that uses the hormone progestin. The approval means that millions of women will have access to the over-the-counter contraception without first having to see a healthcare provider. The FDA voiced hope that the approval could help reduce the roughly 3 million unintended pregnancies in the country each year. The approval comes amid a number of U.S. states banning abortion after the Supreme Court struck down the right to the procedure last year. The pill is expected to be available in stores from early 2024. Now, Hollywood is seeing one of its largest shutdowns in decades, with around 160,000 actors going on strike. Actors officially stopped working on Thursday midnight Los Angeles time after their union, the Screen Actors Guild, announced Wednesday that negotiations with streaming giants failed. The strike start saw actors arrive and then promptly leave the red carpet for the opening of the much-anticipated movie Oppenheimer. The union is asking for a greater share of profits, better working conditions, and assurances that AI technology will not replace actors. The move means that actors have joined Hollywood writers who have been striking for similar conditions since early May. It's the first time in 63 years that both actors and writers have been on strike at the same time.
Good morning. Downpours lashed down across the central regions into overnight, and now the rain clouds have moved to the east, lifting the rain advisory in the capital area. However, more rain is coming down in Jeollado provinces, dropping 40 millimeters an hour. And until Sunday, we will be seeing 20 to 80 millimeters an hour of rain hammering down across Korea. Chungcheongdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces will see downpours tomorrow with up to 300 millimeters in the forecast. Jeollanam-do could see more than 200 millimeters, and Seoul could see up to 100 millimeters more rainfall. Along with heavy rain alerts, a strong wind advisory is also in place along the coastlines in Jeju Island, and the landslide crisis alert is at its highest across Korea. Expect to see monsoon rain into mid-next week, so please stay alert and safe. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next Monday at 9 a.m. Korea time.